Hello, this is the Exodus Now podcast, coming at you live or semi-live if you're hearing this for the first time. You're welcome for this marvelous introduction. You really, really are. anyway, I am joined here by Pastor Shamar Keith.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for that marvelous introduction.
I mean, I do my best work always, you know. I mean, that's a dead giveaway right there.
Dead giveaway.
And also we have here a good friend of mine and a future entrepreneur, well, already an entrepreneur, but also going to be a future leader in the church. I can already tell that, sense it in my spirit, man. Mr. Zack Journey.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Can I wave in silence? Can they hear me wave? That would be awesome.
Perhaps, I don't know. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the subjects I heard for today were actually nothingness, prosperity, new hope, and his judgment. Not meaning like, you know, his as in, you know, anyone in this room, but his as in God's judgment. So we're going to go ahead and explore those themes, and the first up is going to be nothingness. So what do you guys think about in terms of like nothingness? What does nothingness really look like? Because like a lot of times people are trying to define nothingness as something different. I've even heard this in the scientific community where someone was like, you have to redefine nothing in order to get how we started in the universe. But people are kind of like, that's still something. So are we talking about physics? Or are we talking about spiritual nothingness? What are we thinking talking about? Let me take this, Shamar, real quick. Go ahead.
So I was thinking here, Eastern meditation. The idea that to find true peace and wisdom, you have to go to a place in your mind of nothingness that I think is just absolutely fascinating. I hadn't thought about science. Thinking about it from a scientific perspective, I think that the idea of nothing is actually quite different from zero, and I've always confused zero and nothing, but that's not true. Nothing is literally no value. Zero is a zero value, right? So quantitatively different things. But the first thing that came to me was meditation, removing thoughts from your mind.
What about you, Zach?
My opinion that, and this is something to me that just came to mind, really just when you brought it up, kind of on a spiritual sense. Nothingness to me that struck me was a lack of purpose. I'm not sure where that stems from. I don't know if it's just a current season in my life of searching for purpose and remembering a purpose that I have. But even if you walk down the street, just in the city, you look at people that are just wandering. They have no purpose. You know, they're just lost. To me, that is nothing. Like, because there's an existence there, but there's no drive or goal behind it. So it ultimately leads to nothing. Is what, you know, came to mind for me. So and kind of exploring, you know, really how far that goes. Because to me, in that sense, you can exist. You know, you can breathe, you can produce income, you can have a family, and that's fine. But if your existence and the actions behind that doesn't produce anything forward, ultimately it is nothing. So, and that to me was what, you know, nothingness struck me. So,
Pastor, you have scripture in your hand. Right?
Yeah, so I think that your definition of nothing is well-founded.
Yes.
Right? So I'm going to pick a semi-random text here. Isaiah chapter 41, verse 24. Indeed, you are nothing. Your work is nothing. He who chooses you is an abomination. So I think that the definition of nothingness is not being a zero, but it is the absence of purpose given by God. Yes. Right? I'm gonna pick another one. Luke chapter 1, verse 37. For with God, nothing will be impossible. Now, so I'm gonna translate that one just a little bit differently from normal, right? So typically when I've thought about that, I have thought that means that if there is God, then whatever I conceive and desire and go after, I can achieve. But I think that you can take that from a slightly different perspective, and I've learned this style of exegesis from my Jewish brothers and sisters, right? They tend to do sometimes a very good job of taking the text literally. And so taking this really straightforwardly, I would say that if you have God in your life, being nothing is impossible.
That makes sense.
Right? That's just a real clear, straightforward reading of the text. For with God, nothing will be impossible. Right? You can absolutely not have nothingness with God.
It's like automatically because God is within you, you automatically have purpose.
That's correct. That automatic somethingness.
So, to attempt nothingness is rebellion.
Right, which is what so I'm going to come back to where we started Eastern meditation. Right, to attempt to evacuate yourself of the plan and purpose of God automatically leads to not only nothingness, but I'm going to go so far as to say purposelessness and depression.
Do you think that nothingness actually is what... Okay, so if having purpose is inherent, right? It exists because God exists, because He created you, so therefore God doesn't do anything just to do something, right?
Yes.
So I think about the consequence of following nothingness, right?
Yes.
And that's exactly what being lost is.
Yes.
It's nothingness. It's not knowing where up is, where down is. It's not being able to produce anything from your hands. Or even what you do produce from your hands. How much of that is actually you versus what the world is injecting in you?
Yes.
So I was looking at this really, really interesting thing. I was looking at the Netflix documentary Hacked.
Okay.
Okay, do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I do not, but I'll take your word for it.
So Netflix has this show called Hacked, and it talks about how the algorithms of Facebook and YouTube and places like that actually, there's companies out there that spam you information to give you a negative appeal about something. And sometimes even that algorithm gets ahead of the company itself, and it just goes and does things. So a lot of times what you perceive to be your outrage is just a media entity actually pushing you towards a certain agenda so that you vote a particular way or whatever it is. Yeah. I saw where it was I forget what it called. Cambridge? Was it Cambridge?
Cambridge.
No, it's not the school, but Cambridge Analytica or something like that. I forget what they're actually called. But they were talking about how they actually were able to hack another election. So hacking this other election was just a matter of them actually forwarding over a movement not to vote, because they knew that certain people voted, and if those certain people didn't vote, they could have no possibility of voting for the other person.
Wow.
It was really, really something.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was really, really something. And they had done this in real time, and so they created a militant movement in order to make sure that a certain group of people did not vote a certain kind of way. Yeah. And just completely opted them out. So, getting back to what we're talking about in terms of nothingness, even sometimes your outrage or your activism is actually the plan and plot of someone else, and you just become food, like cannon fodder for this entity, and that also amounts to nothing.
Intentional purposelessness.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny you talk about that too. I think, if we speak on a spiritual sense, if we're intended by God to have a purpose, then that means the enemy's objective is to obstruct that purpose. Correct?
Yeah.
So, in that sense, what you were talking about, even with the election, his main goal is, to distract, right? So, you think about, even just on an individual level, when people have addictions or distractions or things like that, even video games or TV or the news or whatever distracts you from, a daily life or habit.
Yep, things that are seemingly harmless.
Right, exactly. Things that if you're supposed to read scripture an hour a day, but you just get distracted, it seems harmless, but that distraction ultimately leads to disrupting your purpose. So if your purpose is then disrupted, that ultimately leads you down a path towards nothingness.
And it's very, very similar to even in video games, right? I'm glad you brought up video games because there's a lot of time and effort used to, especially with men, check this out. A vast majority of gamers are actually men, at least started out that way. And what I think was so interesting is that all that adventurous spirit and that testosterone and things like that is actually put into the game, right? So you have this sense of accomplishment when actually nothing is actually happening.
That's a good perspective.
Yeah. You feel like you beat somebody's tail and you have done nothing.
Yeah. So like I remember when I had beaten this really, really difficult boss. She had like it was a secret super boss, and most in role playing games, yes, I'm that much of a nerd. Fight me. But anyway, when you're that much of a nerd, like you're playing RPGs, and most times like the last boss may have something in the range of maybe like 6 figures of hit points in order to attack it, multiple times with your party and things like that. This one had 20 million HP, and it took me half an hour straight of trying to get rid of this super boss, right?
Wow.
And I'm just like, I finally beat her. I'm just like, oh, I'm throwing the controller, I'm doing cartwheels, and nothing actually changed in my life, other than the fact that I have bragging rights to people who probably would never care about that.
Right.
So, it just became a story and nothing else. But I think that is another testimony of nothingness.
Right.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah. You want to have any thoughts on that?
I think we could talk about nothingness for a long time. There's a lot of avenues to go down there.
There's a lot of something in nothing.
Right. Well, exactly. I mean, and even just in my personal experience in the last, 4 or 5 weeks, how, you have somebody in your life and then they leave and then you realize how empty they are, right? And how much they're distracted by, challenges and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do I say this? They've forgotten, or they're so consumed by worries and fear, it ultimately tracks back to nothingness.
Yeah.
And even back to a spiritual sense, let's say they found something that shows a purpose, and then the enemy knows that they've been shown a purpose, right? How much distractions or trials or things does he then put in their way to ultimately lead them back to a lack of purpose? Back to an average life, just a job where you affect a minimal amount of people, you only serve yourself and stuff like that. Even in that sense, self-serving, to be in a sense of nothingness is, in my perspective, ultimately just to be selfish. Because if you only serve yourself, what purpose does that have?
That's a great point of nothingness right there. Okay, so I think we can move on to the next topic because, unless you have something else to say.
No.
Okay. We can move on to the next topic because this ties in directly with what you're talking about in terms of nothingness, because God knows what he's doing. So next up is going to be actually prosperity.